Okay, so some news earlier on today. The International Boxing Hall of Fame has announced its 2021 Hall of Fame ballot. I'm just going to read the boxers off from this list. So it leads the list with Floyd Mayweather and then follows with boxers like Layla Ali, Vladimir Klitschko, Andre Ward, Ann Wolfe, Davey Moore, and Marianne Tremillard. Now, before I pass it on to you, Neil, I'm just going to read a couple facts from every single fighter on this list. So Floyd Mayweather is not allowed to talk about. Obviously we know about the 50-0. If you know who Floyd Mayweather is, he's a 5-division champion, and he was 2010's Fighter of the Decade. Layla Ali, carry on Muhammad Ali's legacy. It is his daughter. She was a 2-division champion, a super middleweight champion, and a light heavyweight champion, and she was 24-0. Vladimir Klitschko. Now, a lot of people who don't understand boxing, Vladimir Klitschko was a 2-time heavyweight champion. He ran the heavyweight division, him and his brother, for over a decade. This guy was an Olympic gold medalist, and he had a professional record of 64-5, and he has beaten fighters such as Shannon Briggs, David Hayes, and he has been in a lot of battles with guys like Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. So, and he was the big heavyweight before Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, all these other heavyweights came in. He was the big one. So he's going to the Hall of Fame. Andre Ward, in my opinion, is a very underrated boxer. He is a 2-division champion, super middleweight and light heavyweight. He's an Olympic gold medalist, and he had a professional record of 32-0. So another guy who retired undefeated. Then after him is Ann Wolfe. Ann Wolfe is a 3-division champion. She was a super middleweight champion, a super welterweight champion, and a light heavyweight champion. She had a professional record of 24-1. Now going on to the old timers, people who might not know who these people are. Davey Moore, he was a former super welterweight champion. He had a professional record of 18-5. And Marianne Tremillard, she was 14-4. She was a former lightweight champion, and she was one of the first 2 fighters to legally get her boxing license in New York. So I'm gonna pass it on to you, Nate. What do you think about this list?
I think it's a very valid list, but I will say this: Floyd Mayweather is gonna be a unanimous Hall of Famer easily.
No, absolutely.
I think he's gonna be unanimous. I mean, you can't deny 50-0, 5-division champ, 2010 fighter of the decade, one of the greatest fighters of all time. I mean, if you come up here and say, he ain't a unanimous Hall of Famer, you're crazy. I mean, I said the same thing about Mariano Rivera. I thought he was a unanimous Hall of Famer, and guess what? He became a unanimous Hall of Famer, and I think Floyd Mayweather is a unanimous Hall of Famer as well. With that said, Layla Ali bringing down her father's legacy. Muhammad Ali, we all know who he is, one of the best boxers of all time. As for the other ones, it's really cool to learn more about boxing. I still don't have a very clear knowledge of boxing, but the stats prove it, the facts and stats prove it that they belong in the Hall of Fame. But I think when looking at this list, I think Floyd Mayweather is going to end up being a unanimous Hall of Fame decision. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. In my opinion, you know what? People could hate me in the comments. I don't care. Y'all have your own opinions, but I always say this: if you can make a good argument for your claim, it's not that bad of an argument. And so Floyd Mayweather, I'm sorry, my dog's barking upstairs. I really can't control that. But Floyd Mayweather, the argument I want to make for him is we're talking about a guy who was 50-0. Okay. Now I know that's not a lot, but back in the day, people used to fight like over 200 times. And the reason why I put Floyd Mayweather as number 1 is because Floyd Mayweather, he has fought almost every champion you could think of in his time. Like, I mean, we're talking about the Arturo Gattis, we're talking about the De La Hoyas, we're talking about the Manny Pacquiao's, we're talking about the Shane Mosleys, the Ricky Hattons, the Canelos. There's so many I can name. There were so many Hall of Fame fighters that this man has fought, and I mean, Miguel Cotto, Juan Marquez, all these guys he has fought, all these guys he has beaten, and I mean, Zab Judah. These are all boxing fans. Boxing fans know who these are. Good box, but he made the most money in the sport. People would literally pay to see this guy lose. He was a villain most of his career, and a lot of people paid to see this guy lose, especially us. I mean, like, I wasn't the biggest Floyd Mayweather fan, but you'll you never know what you have until it's gone. And when he retired, I suddenly realized who we lost or who left the sport of boxing. And I'm going to be honest with you, Floyd Mayweather is actually, he's had his problems, but he is a good figure in the sport of boxing. He stays in it. He trains young fighters like Gervonta Tank Davis and Devin Haney. They're obviously kind of products to Floyd Mayweather, and he's trying to teach them the stuff that he was taught. So going with that, I really do think Floyd Mayweather is the greatest boxer of all time, only because he has beaten who he needed to beat. He has made the most money in boxing. He has won so many titles in the sport of boxing. And people can say there's a lot of titles in boxing. That's a big controversy. But guess what? Floyd Mayweather never shied away from a challenge. He always stuck. He always went there. He always fought the guys he needed to fight, and he always won. That's why he's 50-0. Going to Layla Ali, she really is the trailblazer. Like, I mean, people talk about Muhammad Ali and how great he was, and that's absolutely true. But Layla Ali was, if people might not know this, but her and Joe Frazier's daughter, they fought in the first ever women's headline pay-per-view in boxing. So she really is a trailblazer. She is, when you think of women's boxing, you definitely think of Layla Ali because she's been such a great figure in that sport of boxing. And she's even talked about, like, there were rumors about, not rumors, but she's even talked about, like, she said, if the price was right and the money was right, I would come out of retirement to fight Clarissa Shields. And if people don't know who Clarissa Shields is, she's basically the person who took the torch from Ali when Ali retired, Layla Ali retired. And she's kind of like the woman fighter now for boxing, but she's heading into MMA. So most likely that fight won't happen. Vladimir Klitschko, let me tell you something about Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko dominated the heavyweight division for over a decade. And we're not talking about like Deontay Wilder, keeps his title for 10 years and Anthony Joshua keeps his for a long time. Tyson, we're not talking about that. Vladimir Klitschko had all the titles for over 10 plus years. You know how hard that is to do, to keep a title for 10 plus years? That is extremely hard, especially in a heavyweight division like that. He was fighting guys like Shannon Briggs, David Hayes, these like British fighters. And honestly, dude, they say it was the most boring time in heavyweight boxing history. But the reason why is because he was laying everybody out. There wasn't anything to be excited about, He was a very like basic fighter, but he always knew what he was. He always knew how to beat people and knock them out. He always knew how to end people. Until Anthony Joshua came. When Anthony Joshua came, and he won his belts, Anthony Joshua really took that heavyweight division by storm. And when Tyson Fury ended up defeating Tyson Fury defeated Vladimir Klitschko first, I believe. Tyson Fury ends up beating Vladimir Klitschko and ends up becoming this huge thing, because so now since he's been beaten, now we got guys like Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury who are going to probably fight each other pretty soon. And I mean, that's the super fight we want to see. But Vladimir Klitschko, even though it was probably one of the most boring times in boxing. He was a big star. He was a big star, especially he was a huge star, this man. And him and his brother Vitaly, they were great fighters. They were great champions. So congrats to them. Andre Ward, the reason why I say he's so underrated is because Andre Ward is a great fighter. He went 32-0. I mean, his career to me seemed short, but it only seemed short because it didn't run as long as Floyd Mayweather's, and he wasn't as talked about like Floyd Mayweather. But Andre Ward beat guys like Sergey Kovalov. He's beat guys like Carl Froch. Carl Froch is a good fighter. He's still fighting. And I mean, Andre Ward, he's a commentator now for boxing. So I mean, he does a great job with that. And as for Ann Wolf, I mean, I don't know too much about her, but 3-division champion. She's held the title in 3 divisions in boxing, so it's nothing to shy away from. 24-1, it's a good record. Davey Moore, it didn't seem like his career was that long, but super welterweight champ, 18-5. And back in his time, it was you basically had like 2 champions. So like for him to be one of them, that is something to really like look at. And then Marion Tremillard, it's not about like her record and like the championship she won, because I mean it was 14-4, and she was a former lightweight champion, which is not really like, it's good, but it's not like compared to all these other people. But the one thing you can point to was she was one of the first ever female fighters to be licensed in New York. And at the time, female fighters, they weren't really
a thing.
Right, they weren't really fighting, and they wouldn't allow it. But her and another lady were one of the first two to be licensed in the state of New York, and that's kind of a trailblazer because that's what kind of paved the way for girls like Ann Wolfe and Layla Ali. So I just want to say congrats to everybody in this ballot, on this 2021 ballot, and I look forward to see who actually look forward to the speeches and everything like that, and just congrats to everybody.